Hi, this is Tessa Keogh, and this is another 20 with Tessa. This is a second in a three-part series where I'm going to cover starting your research in the USA records, especially if you're crossing the pond. And a number of you asked about this, and we had some follow-up discussion in the Guild forum. I'm going to take a look first off at the Horridge one name study that's on the Guild, and that's what you're seeing in front of you. I'm going to take a look at Ancestry.com, but I'm not going to sign into my account. And I believe that if you do a search for that website, Ancestry.com, without signing in, that might be the approach you want to take to get some general information. And then I'm going to move on to the Family Search site, which is a free site to everyone and should look the same whether you're in the United States, Canada, England, or Australia. And so we're going to play with the Horridge one name study in order to see what we could find if we were just doing this on the fly. And this is something I really haven't done before, because if you've watched my other 20 with Tessas, you know I'm a little bit more organized or compulsive, some might say, but we're going to give it a spin and see what happens. First off, I went to the Guild of One Name Studies and just looked up to see if this name was being studied. And the reason that I did this was to find out if this was the surname that a particular individual who asked some questions actually had registered. And once I did that, it told me that the surname was being studied. And there were two boxes, one that said there's a profile available to look at, and one that will direct you to some other websites. I went to the profile, and this is a plug for profiles, because once you do that, you can read a little bit more about this study, and you can find out a little bit more about the individual who's conducting the study. Now, I have a confession to make here, and I guess I can do that since I'm Catholic, which is I talk a good game. I suggested that everyone put their profile on, and I suggested that to the USA West region. And then I noticed that my profile is about 3/4 done but not published. So I am going to have my profile published by the end of July. So come back later and look for it. It will be under the Keogh surname, Keough. So I'm giving myself a deadline. That's the only thing that tends to work for me. Now back to the Horridge one name study. Take a look at the profile. It tells you a little bit about when the person started doing their study, the types of records they looked at, maybe what variants they're including, if they're including any, what the person has found out about the origin of the surname, the distribution of the surname, and any data or links that have been collected to date. And I think that these are all really important things to take a look at. And one other thing I would suggest is if you have put a profile on the Guild website, you need to make sure that you keep it up to date, so that if you change where you have your family website, or you change, for instance, an email or an address that you want to make available to other Guild members, or you add more data to your study. That might be one thing that you want to check once a year and update your profile. But this is a great profile in that it gives me a sense of who Brian is and what he is researching. Now I know that he's researching the Horridge name. So the first thing that I did was I went to Ancestry. And you can see right here, I'm in ancestry.co.uk. So what I did is I came down to the bottom of the page on Ancestry, and I put in where I wanted to enter from, or which website I wanted to look at. And that's how I knew that there were a number of international sites, including Australia, which I agree doesn't have a lot of information if you don't have a subscription. But there's also Canada English and Canada French. There's the United States and the United Kingdom. And then there's some other related sites. But right now we're looking at these international sites here. So we are on the United Kingdom site. And what I needed to do in order to find anything on this site, since I'm not signed in and I don't have a membership, is I clicked on Get Help and asked about surname facts, because I couldn't easily find it by looking in any of these drop-down menus. And that might be something that Ancestry wants to make sure they have front and center, because that's the first kind of thing that gets you interested in finding out about your family. Once I asked about surname facts, I was able to get into the section that I'm looking for, and it says to get started, click here. So notice that I'm in UK customer help, and when I click on this, it takes me to the United States. Still free, still not signed in. This is what you're going to want to do if you're in Australia or anywhere else that's not the United States in order to find out anything about the meaning and history of your last name through Ancestry. And what we're going to do is we're going to type in Horridge and search. Yet again, not signed in. Nothing in my hands, that kind of thing. There's no magic here. In any event, we have the Horridge family history, and it tells us that there are 32,267 historical documents and family trees. Almost 8,000 census and voter lists, some military records, and almost 14,000 birth, marriage, and death records. So that's a good start. And then as we scroll down, we can see the United States, England and Wales, and Scotland, and we get a sense of where this name originated and migrated. We're in the United States in 1840 right now, and it looks like all of the Horridges, which is one, are in New York. So it's going to be a pretty simple start to your research in the United States. If we move on to 1880, we see that they have moved across country as far as California. There's 2 out of the 25 total that are in California at this time, but they're also in states like Missouri, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So that gives us a sense of where you're going to want to focus your research on, and maybe take a look at those states in particular where you have significant individual numbers of your surname. And then in 1920, we have them remaining in the states where they started out with a strong presence, and then there's some addition on the states around it, and that kind of makes sense. So there are not a lot of Horridges in the United States, and there might be a variant name that's used more often here, and you'll want to take a look at that. But this gets you started. You can also see England and Wales, and you only see it for 1881 here. And in Scotland, they're nicer. Well, they couldn't find a geographic distribution for your last name, so either it doesn't appear in Scotland in any of these times, and let's take a quick look because I haven't played with this in advance. It appears that Horridges are not in Scotland, at least from this information that Ancestry has. And that's the thing that you always want to check, maybe at Find My Past or your own records in Scotland. So it gives you the information on name distribution. Let's see what it tells us about family origin. We have, now this is for the United States, they're telling us that the origins are England, a little bit in Scotland, and they refer to Great Britain, so that might be Wales and the north of Ireland. Immigration information for this surname seems to peak in the 1880s. We get some life expectancy, although it does not appear to give information on this one. So this might be one of those cases where you have to sign in. It also might be a case where there's just a glitch in Ancestry today that it's not reading an image. But you can find out information in the SSDI, and I would encourage everyone to gather as much SSDI information as you can, because the United States Congress at various times continues to go back and forth on being concerned about this as a resource. And I have a video about it, 20 with Tessa, that explains how to gather that information from a variety of sources, and also what I think is the best source to get it. So we have family occupations. We have a big winner as farmers and painters in the United States, at least. And then the interesting thing I would point out right here is the message board. And you can do it right from here, or you can ask it to open this up and go to the full board. And if you do that, we're going to just click on this. Boom, we're at the message boards. Again, I'm not signed in anywhere. I want to point that out to you. But you're going to find that there are messages. People are asking about that surname, and you know that because the message board drills down into surnames and then the particular surname. This is a really good stop for anyone who is doing surname research. Make sure that you sign up for this message board and then go through the messages, and you'll be able to read what people are asking about, or sometimes it's information that people are providing. And so one thing I wanted to point out here is if we were to look at the most recent search, I simply click there, and then I always ask it for a flat view because I don't want to click through and open up every single comment that's made. I'd rather just read it all as a series of letters almost back and forth. And so someone is asking a question. They're looking for a particular person. Someone responds. They start giving information, or they tell the person where they might want to search for that information, and they use links. And this is the thing I like about this message board. You can have links, you can have additional information for people. It's a very nice system. Someone has also suggested, and this might be our person right here, this is Brian, to take a look at his one name study. And so he already is registered on this surname. And this just gives you an idea. And you might not have a lot. The more prevalent the surname, the more entries there might be in RootsWeb, but definitely take a look here. So we've looked at that. Now I'd like to show you that still not signed in, using the US site, I can do a search, and I put in the name Horwich, and I can ask for something specific. And what I did here was I asked for census and voter lists from the 1880s. Now it comes back in categories, and of course it tells me that there's any number of Horwiches in London, England, the electoral registers, as well as the England census for 1881. It also tells me that there are some USA records, and that includes the 1880 federal census, of which there are 26 entries. It appears that there are a number of these individuals in Iowa. We have a few in Kansas, Minnesota, and there's also someone who's registered to vote in California. So this gives you some information, the types of results you're going to be looking at. And if you were to ask for records, what I did here was I asked for 1880s because what comes up is the most recent records, and I wanted to maintain the privacy of anyone who is on the 1940 census because there's the possibility that they might still be alive. So we're looking simply at the 1880 results for this surname, and in records we can get a little information still without being signed in. You can get a name, you can get a birth year that's approximate, and you can get a birthplace as well as the residence for that person at the time the census was taken. So we have either a town or a village of Warren, a county of Warren, and a state of Pennsylvania. And there's some research you can do back and forth to find out more about this place. But this gives you at least a start that someone born in England in the 1880 census resides in Pennsylvania and shows up on the census. And when you come here, you're not signed in, but you can see some information. This person is a father-in-law and a widower. Now, if you want to see more, you're going to need to register for a free account, which is 14 days, or you're going to need to look somewhere else. So we come over to Family Search, and we're going to put in the last name of Horwich, and we're going to focus on the United States. But right now I haven't put anything in. I've just put the last name, and here we have the 1940 census. So if I came down here and said I wanted to look at collections, I could say I wanted to look at all of these collections, and I could also tell it I wanted to look at the 1880 census. Now when I do this, and I'm in Family Search, which is a free site, I would suggest that you get an account simply because it's a really nice way of putting your information in a file box or checking sources. Family Search does a great job of telling you what the source should be for whatever records you're looking at. It's just kind of a good start. They save your searches, a couple of things like that. Something along the similar lines of what Find My Past does, what Ancestry does for members who have a subscription. But we're taking a look at James Horridge here first, and I just wanted to show you something really quick, which is if you click on this arrow, this gives you all the information that has been transcribed by the indexers who do this for Family Search, and the vast majority of them do it as volunteers, and I would say they do a pretty good job at Family Search of getting the information right, or at least doing some type of double-blind check on their indexing. But this gives you some information, which is the census, where the event took place, where the person's found in the census, their gender, their age, their marital status, their occupation, their race, their ethnicity, their birthplace. This will tell you with ethnicity that this person may have become a citizen. But you can go through it, and you can also find the citation, which is the page that it appears on the census, as well as the film number for Family Search, and something called their digital folder number. So this is all of the information that you can get that's freely available. And the other thing you can do is where this little picture is, or camera, if we click on that. Now, first of all, I clicked on the name, and I just wanted to show you right away it signs me, or well, I am signed in, but that's not a problem because this is a free account. You could attach this to a tree. You could attach this information to a source box. You could share it with someone. You can also view the image, and there's a number of ways you can do this, and you can save it, and it'll tell you if there's any restrictions. But this is a useful thing to have because you have the 1880 census, you have all this information, and these are links. So it tells you the individual and some basic information, and it tells you everyone else in that household. You could put this information into a genealogy database if you're doing family reconstruction. You could look for this person on, you're going to have to look for them either on the 1870 census or the 1900 census, because I mentioned before the 1890 census was destroyed by fire, I believe. And their ages, you have a real good possibility that they're going to be on either side of this census. And I would take a look and see if in Michigan there were any state censuses. I have never done any research in Michigan, so I have no idea what that is. But if I wanted to find out more about this, I would also take a look at the wiki for Michigan and see what they could tell me about state censuses or about their history. But this gives you some information, and if I said I wanted to view the image, let's see what happens. Now this is the population schedule, and this tells me that we're on a particular page, and the image is 247 out of 738, and we have inhabitants of, it looks like North Star, but I'd have to go back and look, and it tells us the county, and it tells us the state of Michigan, and it tells us the day that this census was taken. I tend to use the day that the census starts being taken. In the United States, it was taken over a series of days or weeks, depending on where you were and how often the enumerator got out and took the census. But the kind of information you're going to find, for instance, the family number and the household number and the names of the people, and as you read across you will see what this information is. And one thing I would suggest is to take a look at a blank census, and I pointed those out to you in the first video yesterday that talked about the censuses in the Family Search Wiki. And so if you click on 1880, you will see a blank version of the census, and you'll be able to see what the questions were that were asked by the enumerator and what was filled in. Once you start playing around with the censuses, you'll get pretty comfortable with it. So what we're looking for is Horridge, And we are finding that as, and I just have to take a look to be sure. What comes first on the 1880 census is the dwelling number. So the house that they went to, and then the family number. And that is going to be different oftentimes because maybe 2 or 3 families lived in the same dwelling. And so that's the difference for the number there. So this is the individual. He's white, he's male, he's 52 years old, he's married, he's a farmer, was born in England, his father was born in England, and his mother was born in England. So the 1880 census gives us that beginning information, and then we're going to need to fill it in, hopefully with later censuses, and fill it in with the censuses of his children later. That will give us some more information. Now 1880, if this individual became a citizen, there are going to be really, I would say, poor records for citizenship, because until 1906, when the United States got much stricter with citizenship paperwork, some states were really good about it. Other states, you could just go down to the superior court, or what's considered a local court, and with a simple piece of paper become a citizen. Others were a little bit more involved and had witnesses or someone who spoke to your character or wanted to know how you came into the country and what date you came to the country. But it's really a hodgepodge until the federal government gets involved and regulates it. Just as a little bit of information here, I would say you might find other individuals. I tend to look a page back and a page forward, and that's simply going back or forward on your image. And I do that because we tend to find our other family members somewhere close by. They kind of all move together as a group, whether that's their surname or perhaps they have a daughter who's married. And I don't know what you all do with your surname research, but you might be finding what I call married in or married outs. And so it just depends on what you want to do with it. But that's how you find information, and the census is freely available, those images. So anytime you see that there's the ability to view the image, definitely take advantage of that. And you can save the image, you can download it to your computer. So if we were to go back to the search that we performed with this surname and look at the collections, we would see that in 1880, it looks like we have 184 results. In the 1870 census, we have 89. In the 1860, 73. And in the 1850, we have 50 results. Now that is for variance. If we're to click and put in exact, and open this up again, we definitely have far fewer. In 1880, we have 25 results. So while I suggested before that you might want to wait until that export or download button is there, with as few results as you have early on in the census, you might want to go ahead and just get started on your records. I talked before about the fact that you could either use a system of copying and pasting this information into a spreadsheet and then transposing the information that will show up in your spreadsheet in a vertical matter into a horizontal matter. And I mentioned that with some other records I talked about and using Excel. But always keep in mind, and this is an easy one if you want to look at it this way, that you also have this information and you have a way that you can cite your source. So you could print this page so that you knew how, when you accessed the information and what census page you were looking at. Hopefully that gets you started on doing your USA research, knowing that you can go to Ancestry.com and use the United States edition for free, not be signed in, and to find out some of that information that you want. And that also you can go over then to the family search page and gather that information because it's freely available to everyone. So that is part 2 of this discussion, and I hope that it gets Brian started on his USA research. Thanks so much for watching.